Helpful facts. About leaving a cult. Example is Jehovah's Witnesses.
I did a video about Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, I don't try to pick on them, but I did a video where I talked about the emotions of it and how hurtful it was, and I got a huge amount of response from people who were saying, you should do some more. So just add this one to the list where, I know it's painful to have your reality change. It's true of Republicans and Democrats too. When their reality changes, it hurts them. And it's painful, and sometimes people just stubbornly stay with their reality, or they do a faux visit. They go to church on Sunday and they just meet their friends and keep their family. Well, that kind of harsh, sectarian, cultish attitude is working against a lot of these religions. People are getting it better. They're getting an understanding how this shouldn't happen with people. It's certainly not our culture, but it is. It's like we've always had this long-term culture of one person being in servitude to another, or one person claiming something grandiose like they represent God, and they really don't. Anyway, I have a lot of compassion for you. It took years to figure out that I needed to prove them wrong, because my leaving was not for any other reason other than their doctrine was crap. It was wrong. Anyway, thank you. So there are some concepts that are basically true, and they might bring some enlightenment to those who are leaving a cult, whichever one it was. And so there's a long line, a long family tree of religions and gods. And they start out to the earliest ones known, so in the Christian line, you start out with Mesopotamia, you start out with the Canaanites, you start out with the Jews, you start out with Christ, you start out with, and then you go to Christians. Mostly from Paul. His teachings are primary with Christians, and so they're pollutions. They're not really Christians. So that's kind of like the basic idea, bringing it down to Christianity. So, and every religions have those. Buddha started out as a prince who wanted to help people according to the legends. He did not claim divinity. He did not claim divine rights. He did not claim that he was God. He just wanted to help people. He was more like a family counselor. And so he came up with the sayings that passed down after Buddha, after Buddha, after Buddha, till you get to the Buddhist philosophy. Then, way back when, some people broke off from that line, and they became, let's call them Zen Buddhists, which were militaristic, violent, and wanted to make a god out of Buddha. So Buddha's a good example. And then Hindus are the same. They have a collection of gods, primary gods, secondary gods. Anybody who's intelligent was a god. So that's just a basic truth, that these religions have a long line of belief systems. Now, the problem with Christ is that when you read just what he said, just read the red letter words, they call it, or just what he said in the Gospels, and you'll find that his religion is totally different than the religions of today. He did not say something. A good example is this. He had asked about being married to one woman, and he's talking to a polygamist, polyamory culture. They were not monogamous. That's a misconception of what was going on. So this polyamory religion is who he's talking to. And he said, well, it should be like the way it was in Adam and Eve, okay? Well, Adam and Eve is a metaphor, but, I mean, the point is that, well, okay, so Adam and Eve is a metaphor. However, the point is that it was related to the context of his day. Homosexuality was very prevalent. It was in the temples. It was everywhere. Prostitutes were common, were prevalent. It was in the temples. It was everywhere. So, and a lot of the rules and people are going to cite, oh, this scripture says, yeah, but that was actually to Jewish people. That was not actually related to Gentiles. And so if you're a Gentile, you can make a pretty good living by being a prostitute or a business with prostitutes. Okay, so that's a general truth. Jesus recited with the idea of the cultures in mind. And so then you have Paul. Now, you read the writings of Paul, James, and some others, and you think to yourself, okay, Paul was a lawyer, a Sadducee, a failure of a lawyer, or probably, and he then had a vision that he records, and then he has miracles that he records, and then this lawyer starts a religion that was completely different than Jesus and Christ. I mean, Jesus didn't believe in heaven. Did you know that? He didn't believe in heaven. They could have believed that God was in a realm, but he didn't believe of people going to heaven because the Jews didn't. So whatever you find out the Jews knew at the time, that's what he believed. He didn't go against these concepts. He went with them. So that was part of his religion. So then we have Paul, who has lack of control. Now he talks to this about it when he talks about loose conduct. Okay, that's section. So what they were doing is they were partying, and they were just doing every crazy thing you can think of, to the point that it was becoming known to the area around them that if you wanted to like be a crazy partier, you became a Christian. And so that's when he started all the like restrictions and all this other stuff. But when you read it with the idea that they were massively partying and he was trying to get them under control a little bit, it makes Paul an understanding. Gives you a good understanding of Paul. I don't believe Paul is a part of the Bible, or should be. I don't think he's Christian teachings. I think he's Pelagian teachings. He wanted to strict him down because he's a lawyer. He wanted to get people under control because he's a lawyer. And so then religions like crazy today, they have shunning and disfellowshipping or whatever they want to call it today. But that idea is actually because of extremes of that loose conduct, because of the extremes of their partying. One guy just went and married his mother. Oh my gosh, he married his mother. Think about that one. That was a shame everywhere. So and then the other couple were men who were just trying to start their own religion. So Paul said, get rid of them. So that whole shunning thing is just unscriptural, and it's bizarre. The other one is governing body, being a bunch of old men. The scripture literally reads, hey, older men. That's it. Older men in Jerusalem made the decisions. Older men, meaning elders, all of them, overseers. So all the older men, if they qualified with the scriptural qualifications, all the older men were to be that governing body. And so this whole crap about having a big giant mechanism, okay, so that's another point we need to really jump on real quick. Okay, so you have this corporation that's $1 billion, multi-billion dollar. Now, a lawsuit came out and said they had $9 billion a year income. Okay, so you have this billion dollar corporation, and they believe that they come from God. Well, Jesus was asked by a young ruler, and he says, how can I become your follower? And he said, sell all your things and come be my follower. And you know what? That's good advice for Jehovah's Witnesses. Sell all your things, become real Christians. Don't do this fake, we're a corporation that's led by God. They call it God-led organization or God-directed organization or people. That's all fake. And when you get down to that reality, you'll understand that it's just a con. The originator, Russell, said that religion was a snare and a racket. Yeah, he's right. And then he built one. Some real con artist stuff in the past. So anyway, they built a pretty good standard model of a cult. And when you realize those things, it might help you to not be so hurt by the fact you were fooled. Millions of people have been fooled. And millions of people have had their money taken and taken their time and allegiance to this religious cult. Thank you. Hey, be good to yourself. Make sure that you understand that you're normal. You're a human being. And, I get that a lot where people are too hard on themselves. You're a human being. You were fooled. It's happening by the millions in politics. So go ahead and give yourself a break and then just go on with life. I know it has consequences leaving Jehovah's Witnesses. That's up to you. But you might find it worth it to find out the truth about them. Thank you.
The signs you are in a cult.
Leadership and authority. Charismatic leaders seem to be infallible, special, unique, chosen, divine. Leaders demand absolute loyalty and obedience. If not, you'll be removed. Criticism is forbidden. Questioning leadership is seen as betrayal against God, a sin. Control over members, isolation from families, friends, the outside world, influences causing the outside to look negative and inside the church positive. Heavy control over information, what you read, what you watch, the internet, what you hear, the debates you might listen to. Us versus them mentality. They're the outside world. We're God's organization. That the outsiders are evil, dangerous, unethical. Strict rules about daily food, dress, relationships, jobs, personal habits, sexual, drinking, smoking, all those other things. Strict financial and time demands, pressures to donate excessive money and property, and wills. These poor children and grandchildren of these people they were coerced into giving their money and their property to the church or the religious organization. Members are expected for long hours for the group. It used to be many meetings and church presence, and they narrowed it down usually. Service to the church or to the organization, where you do cleaning or you do other things that are unpaid. Personal sacrifices demanded for the cause, for God, for Jehovah, whatever that may be. Psychological manipulation, painting an organization as like close to God and holy and loving, brotherly love bombing, overwhelming new recruits with kindness and attention, fear tactics, the threat and punishment, damnation, or disaster if you leave. The implication that God will no longer favor you, therefore you'll be subject to Satan. Shame and guilt are used to control behavior. Shame and guilt, that's a really good one. Think about that one. Gaslighting, making members doubt their own perceptions. Well, the normal person would do this or do that. That's gaslighting. Beliefs and teachings are exclusive. Claims that the only one to have the truth. By the way, all religions do that. We have God's teachings. Okay, so that is a sign of a cult. Teach that salvation, enlightenment, and safety only comes through them, through their leadership, through their bodies and governing bodies. Members believe they are superior to the outsiders. The world is negative, and we are God's chosen people. We are special. That's a manipulation of a cult. And they are just as error-filled as all other religions, but they all do it. It's something that you realize when you're not in this cult, that all the religions do this to a certain extent. Massive consequences for leaving. Now, there are other religions that are famous for disfellowshipping, shunning, and everything. Catholics do it. Jewish people do it. I mean, there's a long list of religions that do that, either very subtly and slowly, or openly and publicly and loudly. So their harsh shunning and excommunication practices are a cult control. Members who leave are called traitors, evil, doomed, satanic, and if they disagree, especially satanic, sometimes threatened with harm or lawsuits. That's not true in most cases, but that is a possibility. It affects your job. It affects these churches employment together, and so it affects their jobs, their contracts, their living. It's all part of the consequences of leaving. So when you ask, well, why do you do this? And they say, well, it's to bring you back to God's organization or God's church. And in reality, it's just a manipulation and control. So those are the official signs of a cult. I would add some more. I would say data mining, taking a specific word out of the Bible and saying, see, this means this. An example of that would be their control over blood transfusions. They for years would say, see this word, abhorrent, right? And so they'd make this huge point on this one word and not realizing that the concept in the Hebrew scriptures is very plain, thou shalt not kill. And so by using that one word to say Christians shouldn't do that, and they kill and murder children for decades and decades. And so that's really data mining would be another sign you're in a cult. Another one I would add would be that religions that say you have to be part of a religious organization to be acceptable to God, they actually are full of shit. You don't have to be. There's nothing in the Bible that says you can't just have a relationship with God. An example of that would be somebody living in the middle of nowhere, and they pray every day, and they serve God every day, and they read the Bible every day, and they are acceptable to God. And so therefore the organization part, the trillion and billion dollar corporations, they want you to believe you have to be in an organization, but you do not. Now socially that's difficult, and so those people find social groups, and then they just believe in God or they worship God. So that would be another one I would add as a side note.